Have you ever been totally overwhelmed with emotion where there's some event or trigger that's flipped you into this emotional storm and you just seem to be completely overwhelmed emotionally, and it's just mentally, it seems like there's 10,000 things running through your head and you wish you could just wave a magic wand and get yourself out of that? Well, if you're human, chances are you've been through that situation and possibly a number of times. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the exact strategies that you can implement to remove yourself while you're in the eye of that storm. So you can be sailing along calmly, peacefully, and not get pulled down and dragged down with these emotions. I'm also going to share with you the difference between healthy and unhealthy detachment. So you know that, hey, I'm actually experiencing life fully and I'm actually not going in a negative direction by becoming emotionally detached. So let's jump right in. So, what is emotional detachment? Well, emotional detachment allows us to remove ourselves emotionally from that event or trigger that's happened. So, if somebody has done some harm to you, or you get that nasty email, or you get a client complaint, or you find out something about your partner or your kid, or something's happened that whack, it hits you with this negative emotion. Now that could be anger, it could be rage, jealousy, anxiety, fear, a whole bunch of confusion. Typically it just feels like you're inundated and drowning with these emotions, and some people feel it more than most, and you think, what the heck is happening? And now your body is reacting to it. You start feeling weak. You might feel lightheaded. Your heart rate's pumping. Your adrenaline is pumping. And you just wish that you could get out of that, right? Emotional detachment allows that event or that trigger to happen, but you're not getting sucked into it. Now, in the beginning, when you start practicing this, it might be difficult for you, but through practice, just the same way that you go lift weights and get your arms and your muscles used to exercise, or you learn how to run and you get better and better and build that stamina and you can run for a long time. The same thing applies to emotional detachment. But once you have mastered emotional detachment, it's probably one of the biggest strengths that you can have as an individual. That, and by the way, this doesn't mean that you're completely cold and removed. In fact, it's the complete opposite. It means that in the midst of all this chaos that's happening, that is the life event or the trigger, you can still remain calm, you can still remain clear in your thought, and your brain is still operating in clarity and operating from a solution based perspective or state of being, rather than in this fight, flight, or freeze mode. Right? So let's look quickly at what unhealthy detachment, emotional detachment is versus healthy detachment. Healthy detachment is what I've just described. It means that you're not going to get sucked into that vortex of negativity and be overwhelmed emotionally and mentally. Unhealthy detachment is a defensive mechanism. In fact, it's a form of shutting everything off. So when somebody does something to you, or somebody says something, or that you have an argument with your partner, or somebody does you wrong, is you just cold. There's no feelings there at all. It's about not experiencing anything, and it's just about shutting it off, ignoring it off, almost shutting off your mind. Now, for me, that happened to me when I was about 11 years old. My father passed away, and quite often it was such a traumatic event for me that quite often when sad events happened later on in life, in certain circumstances, I could go completely cold, and I'd start thinking to myself, like, why am I not feeling anything here? And what had actually happened is, through my teen years, I'd built up such a defensive mechanism, not to everything. Certain things I was completely overwhelmed emotionally, but certain things that happened, particularly around losing loved ones, etc., but mainly other people's loved ones, is I just shut it out. And I had developed that subconsciously as a defensive mechanism because I didn't want to go through that pain and hurt, right? That becomes unhealthy. So as I became moved out of my teen years into an adult, I had to learn how to undo that right? So it didn't become something that was unhealthy where I couldn't show other people empathy, or if people were suffering, I would start withdrawing when I should have been moving closer to my friends. But hey, I was still a teen, I was still learning. So let's take a look at some of the techniques that we can use to make sure that we can practice and have these strategies that allow for a healthy emotional detachment in our life. So, strategy number one, and some of these strategies that I'm going to share with you, you're going to think, well, hey, this is so obvious. Right, these are too simple. Surely there's got to be a magic sort of trick or something that we don't know about. And what you will find was many things in life, in terms of self improvement, self development, or even in business or mastery of any sort of thing, it's making these small adjustments that almost seem too simple, but it's what we practice, these micro adjustments that we keep making every single day and every part of our life, that add up to huge change, magnificent change over time. So the first thing is practicing mindfulness and meditation. Now you might be saying, Kenneth, listen, when I'm in this emotional roller coaster, if I'm in this emotional storm, I'm not going to be able to sit there like a Zen baby and go into the state of meditation. And that's probably 100% accurate. But what you want to be doing is you want to be practicing mindfulness and meditation before and outside these emotional storms or these trigger events that come in your life. Because what mindfulness and meditation allows us to do is it allows us to go within, it allows us to become an observer of our mind. Right? So we practice this. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video, your mind is just a muscle. You've got to work it out. All right, you've got to give it a workout regime by keeping on using it. Now, here's an analogy for you: is I had a couple of like minor shoulder issues while I was surfing about 2 or 3 years ago, and what that was caused from, I thought, man, I was just getting old. At the time, I was approaching the late end of my 40s, and I was thinking, oh, this is maybe just getting old. But what I actually figured out was, I figured out through somebody actually shared this with me. Hey, you should do some stretching. Do you sit a lot at your desk? Do you spend a lot of time? And absolutely. So I spend a lot of time at my desk leaning forward like this, which actually lengthens the back muscle and shortens these front muscles of my shoulder. Right. So I'm not using those muscles as much. So now when I go to use it, it's actually pulling my shoulder just a little bit out of joint. So that actually I might be able to go lift those weights pretty fine. But what happened is the joint was just a little bit off. So by stretching and giving this back shoulder a workout so it shortened and went back to normal, and stretching out these front ones so they weren't shortened, all of a sudden the shoulder issues disappeared, right? Because I hadn't been using these shoulder muscles the right way. And the same thing is now going for your mind. So mindfulness and meditation, it allows us to focus our mind, strengthen our mind, and allows us to detach from our mind and our thoughts and not get sucked emotionally when this trigger event comes along. So you almost become an observer. Now, the thing to really notice about or know about emotional detachment, it doesn't mean that you won't experience negative emotions, right? Because then you wouldn't be human, right? It just means that you don't latch onto them and then they become so big and like a snowball and completely overwhelm you and drag you under if you're in that emotional storm. It's about being able to experience them, but not being pulled down by them. They just move along like a thought in your mind, right? You can have tens of thousands of thoughts every single day. They don't come and overwhelm you and turn into this emotional trigger. Some thoughts do, right? So the first thing is understanding that you should be practicing mindfulness and meditation in all areas of your life as much as you can to start working on this mental muscle of yours. The second technique is identifying the common triggers that cause that emotional storm or that trigger or that overwhelmed with all those negative emotions. And what you'll start finding is you'll start finding there's certain patterns. So for me, there were certain things. When a client would send me in the past a certain email that they weren't happy. So this was when I was working in another area of business. And so I had to deal with a lot of customer facing projects in this corporate world. So clients would, any problem, they'd send it to us, right? And obviously the team was working really hard. I was working hard. But every time we got some criticism, is I took that personally. And I would have these emotional triggers. And what I was doing, I was getting stressed out. And this was early on in my career in investment banking, actually. So I took all of those things so personally. I was thinking, what the heck is going on here? Why do I keep responding this way? And so I started doing this exercise where I started writing, okay, when I get this email, this email, I get the same thing. Why am I responding this way when it's actually clients just giving positive response? But quite often what would happen is this emotional trigger would happen. Say I got an email on a Friday, worst kind of thing. I'd be completely riled up by this email. And look, some of them were rude and, you know, whatever. And I was deflecting everything off the team and off the staff. So I was taking the full brunt of it. But that emotional storm that I got sucked into would typically affect me for the entire weekend. I'd be ruminating these thoughts over and over and over. And then my emotions would come back again. So I'd be in the shower, I'd be with my family, and my wife would say, "What's wrong? I can see you're not." I was, I'm still, no, fine. And I couldn't get out of this. And it'll probably be about 3 days, right? Monday, and I get back, and I've slowly started to calm down. Well, I'd come down, but it was still there. But the high might have been on Friday, then up and down, up and down, and up and down. And I was having these imaginary conversations in my head and replaying the situation over and over. So with that is I started recognizing, man, this is just not healthy. How do I get out of this? And I could start seeing these patterns that were happening over and over. So one, I wasn't mindful. Two is because I hadn't been practicing that mindfulness and meditation. I didn't have the mental strength to handle it. But the real second point is that I haven't really been observing what was happening. And it was my role that I was playing in that. So when I came back to the office and I reread that email on maybe the Monday or Tuesday, it didn't seem as bad. It was just a shift in perspective to say, hey, this is actually not a criticism to, aimed at you, Kenneth, or that team member or that staff member, whatever, but it's a client feedback, right? So it's going to lead me to my third point. But secondly, is what you're staying on the second point is you start seeing there's a pattern. So for me, I identified certain patterns, and what those patterns were, that I would ask myself, where did I feel like this in the past? Why am I responding this way? And I would say to myself, well, why am I responding this way? And I'd find out is actually I'm responding this way because this is making me feel unworthy. This is making me feel not good enough. This is making me feel stupid, making me feel like a failure. So where did I feel like that again in the past? And what I'd realize is that suddenly like this thought would come into my head of me in standard 3 in South Africa, which would be grade 5, right? And I'd come back to a situation with a teacher. And sometimes I could remember that. It's like, I remember that. I was humiliated in class. I felt so crappy. I felt like this, blah, 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 blah. Right. And then I could say, okay, I've actually got to go use that to fix myself. So I'd go work on myself. So whatever that is that I need to, that I am worthy, that I am good enough, blah, whatever it is, right? Blah, 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 blah. I've used quite a few blah, blah, blahs. But I had to go do the work around unworthiness, not good enough, insecurities, fear, I'm a failure, and all of these different items. That's where I had to do the work. So the second point is really identifying where they are, and which leads to the third point. And the third point is now going and doing the work. You see, you can watch as many of these videos as you want. You can read all the books. You can go to therapists. You can go do all of these things, but nothing will happen if you don't do the work. Like all the knowledge in the world doesn't mean anything unless you do the work. Right. So for me, it's been one of the most difficult things to become emotionally detached. So today was a perfect example where in the past I would have got triggered by something completely, almost felt like nothing there. Right. I was strong in it, right? Because I knew the way that I wanted to feel. Doesn't make the problem go away or the challenge go away. That challenge and that problem still needs to be addressed, but I'm not allowing myself to get brought and pulled into the storm. Now, the fourth thing, okay, so the third thing, you doing the work. The fourth thing is also looking at these challenges, looking at these things that come along with the eye of compassion. So, going back to those email examples, is not only did I do the work on myself, identifying these points, is from an eye of compassion. And this doesn't mean that you're better than anybody else, but what it allows you to do is this: it allows you to say, well, why is that person sending that email? Put yourself in their shoes, right? They're investing in this company that I'm working with. They're paying that company that I'm working with their fees. They probably get charged monthly brokerage fees and these kind of fees and whatever fees, and they're in a place of fear. Maybe they're worried about their money. Maybe they have some health issues. Maybe their mom is sick or their parent is sick. Maybe there's something wrong with their kids. So their stress levels might be pretty high. And this thing has come along, which happens to be the company I work for, and they're reacting because they need to take out that anger. Or they might just be in a good place, but they're truly disappointed. So I can come from the thing of compassion and saying, okay, maybe there is something in their life, but at the same time, not being condescending or too egocentric, would say, okay, well, I'll pray for you. Yes, I understand you, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay. It's not about that at all. It's saying, is there something I can learn from this that we can improve? But also, maybe there's something going on in this person's life that caused them to react this way, that caused them to speak this way. So let's come to a solution. Now, there might be instances where there's just weird people, nasty people, grumpy people, and they are just angry. No matter what you say to them, you can get on a call, you can be as peaceful as however you want, but they're going to carry on coming at you. This is where emotional detachment is so powerful, right? Being able to control and not getting sucked into that. Okay. The next thing that I want to speak about, which I believe is the fifth point, is setting boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, you'll find that people, certain things that are happening in your life that are these triggers, will continue to push those boundaries. So, boundaries is not just for other people. So, you can say, hey, look, we can have this positive discussion, but if you're going to start speaking to me like that, this call is over. We don't accept that. Okay. So that's one thing. The other thing is to loved ones, to friends, etc. You set boundaries around the way people can treat you, the way people speak to you, but also how much they demand of you, because you might be getting triggered uh, a lot emotionally because you are overwhelmed in your own life. People are demanding too much from you. And finally, you also might need to set boundaries for yourself, because you might be demanding too much from yourself because you're busy out there saying yes to everything and you've taken too much on your plate. Okay. So that's the fifth thing that you need to think about: setting healthy boundaries, which leads me to the sixth point, is keeping tabs of the stress levels in your life, right? So this again may seem oversimplistic, but when you're tired, when you're not happy in multiple areas or certain areas of your life, what's going to happen? You're going to be able to handle stressful events, emotional triggers in a less effective way, meaning you're going to be more vulnerable. You know this, I know this. When you haven't slept, you're tired, you're a little bit grumpy. You tend to snap at people, you tend to react negatively. It won't help you. So if you're not getting enough sleep, start focusing on your sleep, protecting your energy. If you've got too many stressful things on your plate, which goes back to the boundaries, release some of them, right? You're going to be able to come from a more energetically a place of strength, an emotional place of strength, rather than being vulnerable and weak. And it's also about how you start thinking on a day-to-day basis. So when you wake up in the morning, you need to put yourself in a state emotionally that's going to allow you to go out in the world and deal with the stresses that are going to come to us, right? So you've got to control the things that you can control. And that goes down to things like sleep, rest, too much stress on your plate, but also creating your emotional equilibrium at the start of the day. So waking up at a good time and focusing on it intentionally on your goals for the day, doing a gratitude exercise, meditating, praying, having some form of spiritual practice, spending time with a loved one, spending time with your kids, going through affirmations, visualizations, starting with the morning exercise. Control and own your morning, because you say, hey, this is how I want my emotional set point and my mental set point to be for the day. I'm going to control it. Otherwise, if you don't, you're just going to wake up and allow the day to unfold as it does. You're going to become just responding to emails and responding to life events, however you wake up feeling that day. Because not every day you're going to wake up feeling refreshed and happy and in emotional balance. You've got to go do the work to put yourself in that state of being, in that frame of mind. Okay, so I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed it, I'd love to hear your comments. Leave your comments below, leave your feedback, any questions that you have. If you haven't already, I'd love you to subscribe to the channel too. So make sure you implement these 6 techniques, understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy emotional detachment, and start exercising this. And until the next stressful event or emotional trigger, I want to hear back from you if any of these strategies work. Right? So remember, don't wait until the event happens. Start implementing them now before that event happens, because without being negative, but just a fact of life, they will happen. So do the work now and you'll thank yourself later. And don't give up on the first attempt. This is work. Some things you'll be able to handle straight away. And then there's bigger things, bigger triggers that might take you a few weeks, a few months, a few years to get rid of. But at least you'll be in control of things. Appreciate you. This is Kenneth, and take it easy. Cheers.